I kept my expression neutral when my managing partner called me into his office that Tuesday morning. I already knew what he was going to say. I'd seen the calendar invite, quick sync Audrey, 9 a.m., and I'd spent the previous night finalizing paperwork that would change everything. "Audrey," he said, leaning back in his chair with the particular ease of a man who had never once doubted his own judgment, "we've made a decision about the Hartwell Group account leadership." I nodded, said nothing. "We're going with Bridger." Not a question, not an apology. He said it the way you'd announce a weather forecast. "Partly cloudy, high of 62, and by the way, the 8 years you've spent building this firm's most valuable client relationship don't quite outweigh the fact that Bridger plays golf with the senior partners every other Saturday." "I see," I said. "May I ask what specifically I could improve for future consideration?" He smiled. That particular smile that men in positions like his deploy when they want to appear thoughtful without actually being so. "It's not about improvement, Audrey. Bridger just has a certain presence. The clients respond to that energy." I picked up the folder from my lap and placed it on his desk. He looked down at it. "What's this?" "My resignation," I said, "and something else you should review." I stood, smoothed my blazer, and walked out before he had the chance to open it. The drive to my attorney's office took 11 minutes. I know because I counted traffic lights, an old habit I developed during the years I commuted from Glendale to downtown Los Angeles before I could afford to move closer to work. Back when I was a junior associate at a firm that shall remain nameless, sharing a one-bedroom with my college roommate and surviving on instant ramen and the occasional free lunch when a partner decided to be generous. That version of me would have been stunned by what I'd just done. I almost smiled thinking about it. My name is Audrey Callahan. I'm 41 years old. I have a law degree from USC and a master's in corporate finance that I completed at night while working full-time. A decision that nearly killed my social life and definitely killed 2 relationships. I have a daughter in 8th grade who builds robots in her spare time. I drive a sensible Volvo and I make excellent pie crust from scratch, which is relevant only because it tells you something about how I approach things. Methodically, patiently, with attention to the kind of detail that other people overlook. I had worked at Callaway Merchant Partners for 8 years. I had brought in the Hartwell Group. And now I was going to walk away with them. Let me back up. The Hartwell Group is a mid-sized real estate development company based in Phoenix, with projects scattered across the Southwest. When I first pitched them as a potential client for CMP, my managing partner, I'll call him what he was, barely looked up from his phone. "Small fish," he said. "They're about to close a $400 million mixed-use development in Scottsdale," I told him, "and their current legal counsel just retired. There's a window." He told me to put together a proposal. Then he gave the proposal to one of his golf buddies to present, without mentioning my name once. The Hartwell Group passed on that presentation. 6 months later, I reached out to their CFO directly. I'd met her briefly at a Phoenix Chamber event, a sharp woman named Constance who had a habit of asking the follow-up questions that most people never thought to ask. We had coffee, then lunch. Then a long working dinner where I walked her through a restructuring strategy that their previous counsel had either missed or ignored. She called me the following Monday. "We want CMP," she said, "but we want you specifically. Is that something you can arrange?" I arranged it. Over the next 7 years, the Hartwell Group went from a $400 million Scottsdale project to a portfolio of 16 developments across 4 states, with a legal services contract worth just over $2.1 million annually to our firm. I knew their business the way you know a language you've spoken since childhood. Instinctively, fluently, able to think in it without translating. And for 7 years, my managing partner accepted the credit with the particular grace of someone who has never had to question whether credit was rightfully his. The first time I was passed over for equity partnership, I was told it was about billable hour benchmarks. I looked at the benchmarks. I exceeded them by 23%. The second time, it was about client development bricks. I had brought in 4 new clients that year, including one that had since become our 3rd largest account. The 3rd time, which was a month ago, he didn't even offer an explanation. He just promoted Bridger, who had been with the firm for 3 years, had a pleasant handshake and an Instagram account full of charity golf tournaments, and had never personally sourced a single significant client relationship. I went home that evening, made dinner, helped my daughter with a science project involving electromagnets, and sat at my kitchen table after she went to bed. I thought about the coffee I'd had with Constance 7 years ago. I thought about the weekend I'd spent rewriting a 200-page contract on a tight deadline because our then lead associate had come down with the flu, and I was the only person who knew the Hartwell account well enough to catch the structural issues buried in the annexes. I thought about the raise I'd requested the previous year, which was approved at 60% of what I'd asked for, and the partner meeting where someone had suggested, out loud, in a room with 6 people present, that I should consider whether the equity track was the right ambition for someone in my situation, which we all understood to mean someone with a child and without a spouse who could absorb schedule fluctuations. And I made a decision. The decision had actually been building for 2 years, if I'm honest. I'm not someone who acts on impulse. I'm someone who makes sure the ground is solid before I step on it. So while I was quietly attending evening networking events and reconnecting with contacts I hadn't spoken to in years, while I was consulting with an attorney who specialized in partnership agreements and non-compete clauses, while I was meeting with a business formation specialist and a commercial banker who had financed the early-stage growth of 3 boutique law firms in the previous decade, while I was doing all of that, I continued to show up at CMP every morning at 7:30 and do my job at the level I had always done it. You don't telegraph your exit. You don't let bitterness leak into your work. You do not give anyone a reason to question your professionalism in the months before you leave, because the story you want told about you on the way out is the one where they say, "We can't understand why she left. Everything seemed fine." Let them be confused. Let them be caught off guard. That is by design. The question of Hartwell came last. I want to be clear about something, because I know how this part of the story sounds from the outside. I did not steal a client. I did not breach my non-compete. I did not misuse confidential information or solicit employees during my notice period or do anything that my very thorough attorney would have flagged as a problem, and she had been thorough. Obsessively so. We had gone through the CMP partnership agreement line by line, twice. What I did was have a conversation with Constance. I told her I was leaving. I told her why. I told her what I was building and where I thought I could take her company's legal strategy over the next 5 years, because I had been thinking about it anyway, and the ideas were good and I thought she deserved to hear them. And then I said, "Whatever you decide, I understand completely. I just wanted you to hear it from me first." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Audrey, you've been carrying this account since day one. Everyone at Hartwell knows that. What time should I tell the contracts team to expect your paperwork?" I gave her a date. I gave her the name of my new firm, Callahan Advisory Partners, registered in the state of California 6 weeks prior. I had my business formation documents, my liability insurance, my office lease on a small but professional suite in Pasadena, and a line of credit that my commercial banker and I had spent 3 months structuring. Constance signed within the week. The folder I left on my managing partner's desk contained my resignation letter, effective 30 days hence, and a copy of the signed retainer agreement between the Hartwell Group and Callahan Advisory Partners. I learned later from a former colleague I trust that he read the letter first, then turned the page, then sat very still for a long time before picking up the phone. He called me 4 times that afternoon. I did not pick up. My attorney had advised me not to engage until we'd had a chance to review any initial communication for escalation risk, which in practical terms meant let him leave voicemails, let him draft the emails, and let the legal record show that whatever he decided to say in that emotional moment, I had responded with patience and measured professionalism. His first voicemail was composed. "Audrey, Please call me. I think we should talk before this goes any further." His fourth voicemail was not composed. I let my attorney handle the response. The 30-day notice period was the strangest professional experience of my life. I came in. I did my work. I documented everything meticulously. Handover notes, status reports, client communication logs, because I wanted to leave no legitimate basis for any claim of professional negligence. I had coffee with the 2 junior associates I'd mentored most closely and told them, privately and with great care, that I was leaving and that I thought they were exceptional and that I hoped they would find their own paths as clearly as I was beginning to find mine. I did not recruit them. I did not suggest they follow me, but I left the door open in the way that honest people leave doors open, by being clear about who I was and where I was going and letting them draw their own conclusions. By the time I walked out on my last day, both of them had put in their own notices. That was not something I engineered. That was something that happens when people spend years watching a place fail to value the people who actually carry it. Callahan Advisory Partners opened its doors on a Monday in March. Our offices in Pasadena were modest. A reception area, 4 private offices, a conference room with a long oak table I had found at an estate sale and refinished myself over 2 weekends. There was a coffee set up in the kitchenette that I had personally stopped the Friday before because the details matter and because I am someone who believes that the environment you build reflects the values you intend to keep. We had one anchor client on day 1, the Hartwell Group, with a contract worth $2.1 million annually. By the end of our first quarter, we had 3 additional clients, 2 of them sourced by our junior associates, who it turned out had been quietly cultivating relationships that CMP had never properly supported. We were 4 people in an office that smelled like fresh paint and good coffee, billing hours that already exceeded what our monthly overhead required. I won't pretend it was easy. There were nights in those first weeks when I sat at my kitchen table with a spreadsheet open and a glass of wine and a quiet fear that the numbers wouldn't hold, that something would go wrong with the Hartwell transition, that the non-compete challenge that CMP's legal team had begun drafting would somehow have merit I hadn't accounted for. Fear is not irrational. It's information. The question is whether you let it make decisions for you. I did not. My attorney handled the non-compete challenge. It went nowhere because I had spent 2 years making sure it would go nowhere. My commercial banker called to check in. My accountant set up a quarterly review schedule. I hired a part-time operations manager who turned out to be the best professional decision I'd made in years. A meticulous woman who had been running the back office of a boutique firm for a decade and had grown tired of being overlooked for any role that required her to be in front of clients. She understood, without my having to explain it, exactly why I had started this firm. 8 months in, the Hartwell Group exercised an option to expand our retainer. Constance called me herself to tell me. "The board reviewed it," she said. "They want to formalize the partnership. We're looking at a 3-year agreement." I told her I was pleased to hear it. After I hung up, I sat in my office with the door closed and let myself feel it, really feel it, for about 90 seconds. The specific quality of relief that arrives, not when a risk resolves in your favor, but when you realize finally that the ground you decided to step on was solid the whole time. Then I opened my door and told my operations manager. We had a small celebration that evening, just the 5 of us, because we brought on one more associate by then, a young man who'd reached out to me directly after reading about our formation in a local business journal. We went to a Thai place on Colorado Boulevard and I insisted on paying for everything, and we stayed until the restaurant started stacking chairs around us. My daughter called me on the walk back to my car. "How was today?" she asked. "Really good," I said. "Did something happen?" "Something I worked toward for a long time," I told her. "Finally worked." She was quiet for a moment. She's at an age where she's skeptical of easy sentiment, but still listening for the real thing underneath. "That's cool, Mum," she said finally. It was. I think about what I would tell someone who was sitting where I was sitting 8 years ago, doing excellent work, being systematically passed over, beginning to wonder whether the problem is something unfixable about themselves rather than something structural about the place they're in. The hardest part isn't leaving. The hardest part is the period before you decide to leave, when you keep giving the institution one more chance, one more performance review cycle, one more year, because you've invested so much that walking away feels like admitting defeat. It isn't defeat. It took me a long time to understand that staying in a place that doesn't value you, staying politely, professionally, without anger, while quietly building the thing that makes leaving possible, that is not passivity. That is strategy. The anger I felt, I put into the LLC registration paperwork. I put it into the business plan. I put it into every networking coffee and every late night reviewing partnership agreements and every conversation with my attorney about what was and wasn't enforceable. I stayed calm in that office when he told me about Bridger because the decision had already been made. Not in that moment. Months ago, in my kitchen, at midnight, after my daughter was asleep. The calm wasn't performance. It was the particular piece of a person who has already taken care of things. The industry evolves. The market shifts. Clients follow the people who actually understand their business, not the people who happen to hold the right title at the right firm. I raised a glass to my team at that Thai restaurant on Colorado Boulevard, and I meant it entirely. Some exits are endings. Mine was a beginning I'd been writing for 2 years, one careful page at a time. There's a moment I keep coming back to. Not the morning I walked out, not the phone calls I didn't answer, but the night before any of it started. I was sitting at my kitchen table, my daughter already asleep down the hall, and I had a spreadsheet open and a decision that had been forming so slowly I almost didn't recognize it as a decision at all. It just looked like clarity. Finally. I think about what it cost me to stay as long as I did, not in salary or title. Those are easy to measure. I mean the quieter cost, the way you start to edit yourself in meetings, the way you stop sending the bold proposal because you already know how the room will receive it. The way being professional becomes a cover story for absorbing treatment you should have named out loud 2 years earlier. I stayed because I believed that if I kept doing excellent work, the outcome would eventually match the effort. That's not naive. It's a reasonable assumption in a functional system. The problem was the system. What I understand now, on the other side of it, is that results without strategy are just raw material. Someone else will always be willing to package them and call them their own. Constance didn't sign with me because I was available. She signed because I'd spent 7 years learning her business at a level nobody else at that firm had bothered to reach. That kind of knowledge isn't transferable. It lives in the relationships you build with actual attention, not with titles or corner offices. I had done the right thing, consistently, even when the right thing wasn't being rewarded. And it turned out that mattered, just not in the place I had originally expected it to matter. The harder thing to talk about is the fear. People see a story like mine, and they see the clean version. The folder on the desk, the signed contract, the quiet exit. They don't see the midnight spreadsheets, the months of second-guessing, the very specific terror of walking away from a salary you structured your life around when you have a kid depending on you. Courage isn't the absence of that fear. It's the decision to keep working the problem anyway, one careful step at a time, until the path you've built is solid enough to walk on. That's what I want someone to take from this. Not the revenge part, that's satisfying to tell, but it's not the point. The point is the 2 years before the folder, the networking coffees I took when I was exhausted, the attorney consultations I paid for out of savings, the business plan I rewrote 4 times, the slow, unglamorous, deeply unglamorous work of building something real while everyone around me assumed I was simply showing up. Integrity is what you do when the institution stops watching. I kept doing good work because I couldn't do it any other way, and that ended up being the foundation everything else was built on. My daughter called me the night Constance confirmed the 3-year retainer. I told her something had finally worked out. She said, "That's cool, Mom. in the way 13-year-olds do when they're actually proud but won't fully show it yet. That was enough. That was more than enough.